Tarawa is barely a speck on the map, Betio Island, a thin strip of coral and sand at the edge of the Gilbert Islands. But in November 1943, that speck became a test that could have broken the Central Pacific Drive before it truly began. The plan looked clean: a short bombardment, a fast landing, an airfield captured in hours. Then the reef and the tide rewrote the script. Landing craft stopped dead. Marines had to cross open water on foot. And every yard forward was measured against time, ammunition, and the simple question of whether the invasion method itself still worked. Because if Tarawa couldn't be taken, quickly, decisively, then every island ahead would demand the same price, and the road to the Marianas might close before it opened. Please like and subscribe my channel. In late 1943, the United States is no longer just holding the line in the Pacific. It's choosing where to strike. After Guadalcanal, the tempo shifts. The goal is to build momentum through a chain of bases that can push air power and sea power deeper toward Japan. But there are two competing routes, one through the Southwest Pacific and another through the Central Pacific. The Central Pacific option is brutally direct. A staircase of atolls, each one exposed, each one defended, each one requiring an amphibious assault under fire. That's what makes the Gilbert Islands so important. They're not the final objective. They're the proof of concept. If the U.S. Navy and Marine Corps can seize a fortified atoll quickly, they can keep the offensive moving through the Marshalls, then the Marianas, and beyond. If they can't, the war slows down. And in 1943, time matters. Japan is still strong enough to punish mistakes, and every month gives it more chances to harden the next ring of defenses. Tarawa Atoll sits in that gateway position. Betio, the key island on the atoll, is small, so small that on a map it barely looks like a battlefield. But that's exactly the trap. Small means there's nowhere to maneuver, no flank to turn, no safe rear area to build up quietly. Any landing force is compressed into narrow beaches and shallow water, with limited routes inland. And the defenders know it. By this stage of the war, Japanese strategy on many islands is shifting toward a simple logic: don't trade space for time, trade casualties for time. Fortify the shoreline. Build interlocking fields of fire. Use bunkers and pillboxes to force attackers to pay for every meter. And then make the enemy's victory so expensive that it slows the entire campaign. On Betio, that logic is built into the ground. The island is engineered into a fortress: coastal guns, strong points, trenches, and prepared positions that can survive bombardment and keep firing. The goal isn't to hold forever. The goal is to make the landing fail early, when attackers are most exposed and most crowded, and when confusion can spread faster than orders. And here's the first uncomfortable reality: an amphibious assault is a choreography. Ships, aircraft, landing craft, and infantry all have to hit the same timing window. If that timing breaks, the whole operation becomes improvisation, often the worst kind, done under fire. The American plan, Operation GALVANIC, brings overwhelming naval strength and a major landing force. The 2nd Marine Division is selected for Betio. The concept is straightforward. Naval gunfire and air strikes soften the defenses, landing waves hit designated beaches, and the Marines seize the airfield quickly enough to bring the island under control before the defenders can reorganize. For the operation's structure and context, see Naval History and Heritage Command summaries. But Tarawa isn't a normal coastline. Betio is ringed by coral reef. At high tide, some landing vehicles can pass over it. At lower tide, boats and many landing craft can't. And this is where the battle's most infamous factor enters. The tide isn't just high or low. It's the difference between landing at the beach or being forced to unload hundreds of yards offshore. The Marines do have tracked amphibious vehicles, LVTs, designed to cross reefs and shallow water. But there aren't enough for every wave, and not every unit is riding in them. A significant portion of the assault still depends on landing craft that need water depth to move forward. So before the first Marine steps onto Betio, the entire operation is already balanced on a natural variable the defenders can't control, but the attackers also can't fully command. Now add another layer: naval bombardment. It is powerful, but it isn't magic. Bombardment can destroy visible targets, shake defenses, cut wires, and crater runways. But well-built fortifications can endure. And when defenders are underground or behind reinforced positions, bombardment may stun without neutralizing. The invasion plan assumes the fire support will do enough to let the landing waves establish a foothold rapidly. Tarawa will expose what happens when enough isn't enough. The assault begins on November 20, 1943. The landing waves form up and the movement begins toward the beaches. Almost immediately, the reef makes its presence felt. Boats slow, then stop. In places, they can't go further. Marines begin disembarking into water, carrying weapons and equipment, trying to keep formation while moving across open space. For period photo documentation and official framing of the assault, see Naval History and Heritage Command resources. This is where Tarawa becomes more than a battle. It becomes a diagnostic test of doctrine, of equipment, of assumptions. Because an amphibious landing is supposed to minimize the time troops are exposed. But when craft are stalled on a reef, exposure is no longer measured in seconds. It's measured in minutes. And minutes are long enough for defenders to aim carefully, adjust fire, and turn the lagoon into a killing zone, without needing to repel the landing in a dramatic sense. The landing can simply bleed out before it consolidates. But here's the twist. Tarawa isn't decided by one dramatic failure. It's decided by a series of small breakdowns that compound, each one forcing the next improvisation. Some units do reach the beach quickly, especially those in LVTs that can cross the reef. But landing on a narrow beach under fire creates its own problem: crowding. Men, equipment, radios, and ammunition pile up in a thin strip of sand with limited cover. If the first waves can't push inland rapidly, the beach becomes a traffic jam with bullets. And the terrain inland is not forgiving. Betio's defensive scheme is built around mutually supporting positions. That means a pillbox isn't just guarding its own front. It's tied into other strong points so that attackers advancing on one position are exposed to fire from another. It also means that even when a single bunker is knocked out, nearby positions can continue fighting. The defenders don't need to hold a continuous line. They need to hold a network. The early hours are a struggle to turn landing into control. Marines push through gaps where they can, using demolitions, grenades, and direct fire to reduce strongpoints. Tanks are brought forward where the ground allows, but getting armor onto a contested beach and then inland is a challenge in itself. When tanks stall or are disabled, infantry loses one of the few tools that can quickly crack reinforced positions. Meanwhile, the clock is always running. Ammunition is consumed faster than it can be moved. Water becomes a problem. Radios fail or are lost. Units become mixed. Leaders who planned carefully now have to assemble ad hoc groups and push them toward objectives that were supposed to fall in a neat sequence. And the defenders are doing exactly what the fortifications were designed to do: delay, disrupt, and punish concentration. This is also the moment when Tarawa's wider stakes come into focus. The public will learn about this battle through official photography, through reporting, through the unavoidable fact of casualty numbers. The military will learn something even more dangerous. The invasion playbook itself may be outdated when reefs, tides, and fortifications combine. So the pressure is not only to win, it's to prove that the method works. Because the method is the campaign. As the first day continues, progress is made, but it's uneven. Some sections push inland, others are pinned near the shore. Fire support from ships and aircraft continues, but coordinating it with troops who are intermingled and moving in tight spaces is difficult. The very closeness of the battlefield, small island, short distances, creates a constant risk of misalignment. Precision matters, and precision is hardest when units are fragmented. And here's what makes Tarawa so unforgiving: there is no safe pause. A stalled landing doesn't simply wait until tomorrow. It fights through the night with whatever it managed to bring ashore. By nightfall of November 20th, the Marines have footholds, but not the clean breakout the plan wanted. The island's size becomes an advantage for the defenders. They can shift fire quickly, and every route inland is short enough to cover. For the attackers, Small means there is no operational depth. Every supply run is exposed. Every casualty evacuation is difficult. Every reinforcement wave faces the same reef problem. On November 21st, the battle becomes more systematic, less about landing and more about reduction. Strong points are taken one by one. Progress happens in harsh increments. Naval gunfire is called in to smash obstacles and fortifications that block movement. The beachheads expand, and more troops and equipment come ashore. But the fight remains close, difficult, and expensive. For a general timeline of the fight and its 20 to 23 November arc, see institutional summaries such as NHHC. At this point, Tarawa's lesson is beginning to crystallize inside the battle itself. Bombardment must be longer, more targeted, and more integrated with the landing plan. Landing craft must be matched to reef conditions, not just ideally, but realistically. And communications must survive the first chaotic minutes, because without them, coordination collapses. But none of that helps the Marines who are already there. They have to finish the job with the tools on hand. This is where we can place one verified on-screen quote, not as dramatized dialogue, but as a historical artifact of mindset. 1 million Americans couldn't take Tarawa in 100 years. Rear Admiral K.G. Shibazaki, as cited in Across the Reef, The Marine Assault of Tarawa, Marine Corps University Press, PDF edition. Whether the exact phrasing was repeated secondhand or captured through intelligence reporting, the point is clear. The defense was built with confidence that the assault would break on the shoreline. But here's the twist. Tarawa's outcome won't hinge on confidence or bravado. It will hinge on whether the Marines can turn improvisation into a repeatable process before they run out of daylight, ammunition, and momentum. By late November 21st, the Americans are pressing deeper toward the airfield and across the island's interior. The airfield itself is a central objective, not just as a strip of ground, but as a way to control the island's center and split the defense. Capturing it also signals that the battle has moved beyond a beachhead fight into a fight for total control. Yet, even as ground is gained, pockets of resistance remain lethal. Fortifications can be bypassed, but bypassing creates danger. A strong point left behind can fire into routes that supplies must travel. That means the Marines can't simply advance. They have to clear. Clearing takes time. The battle's rising danger now is less about whether the landing failed, and more about whether the cost of clearing will slow the entire Central Pacific timetable. Because Tarawa is the first major atoll seizure of this kind. What happens here will shape how commanders plan the Marshalls and Marianas. And those are bigger fights with bigger stakes. As November 21st turns into November 22nd, exhaustion becomes part of the battlefield. Units have been fighting in close quarters on a tiny island under constant pressure, while maintaining enough coordination to keep moving forward. This is also the phase where the assault's shape changes, from chaotic beach congestion into narrower drives against remaining positions. And with that change comes the key open loop the story has been building toward. If Tarawa exposed the flaws in amphibious planning, tides, reefs, fortifications, what is the turning point fix? What exactly changes inside the battle that turns a near stall into a final breakthrough? Because at the end of Module 1, the invasion is not yet secure. The Marines have gained ground, but Betio is not cleared. The defenders are still fighting from prepared positions. The airfield is contested. The battle is now a race between methodical reduction and the risk that attrition, men, equipment, and tempo will flatten the offensive before it can move on. Mini cliffhanger, end of Module 1. By the second night, Tarawa has already rewritten the rules the Marines thought they were following. But the island's most dangerous lesson is still ahead, because the turning point won't be a single charge. It will be a shift in how the assault force uses firepower, armor, and timing to break the remaining network of bunkers. And if that shift fails, the entire Central Pacific route could inherit Tarawa's worst problem, a landing that reaches the beach, but can't escape it. Tarawa began as a planned demonstration of amphibious power, then the reef and tide forced many Marines to wade in under fire, turning the lagoon into a deadly delay. By the end of the first day, the landing wasn't a clean breakthrough, it was a hard-won foothold, crowded and fragile. Now, with Betio still not secured, the fight has shifted from getting ashore to clearing a fortress, one strongpoint at a time. The stakes are bigger than this island. If this method can't work here, the islands ahead will demand the same price again and again. The core problem the Marines face now is structural. Betio's defense is not a single line. It's a mesh. That means the assault must become organized demolition under pressure. And in this phase, coordination matters even more than courage, because without a plan to isolate and neutralize strongpoints, every advance risks becoming a lethal crossfire. So what changes? First, the Americans begin to apply fire support in a more responsive way, less as a one-time preparatory blast and more as a tool that moves with the infantry. Naval gunfire and direct fire are brought in to reduce specific obstacles, and forward observers become critical, guiding strikes against positions that are stopping movement. Official photo collections and battle pages emphasize the operational scale and documentation of this assault. Second, the ground fight becomes increasingly about combined arms at the smallest scale. Tanks, when they can be kept running and supplied, are used to punch holes and suppress strong points long enough for infantry to close. Engineers and demolition teams become decisive, because fortified positions rarely go away without deliberate clearing. The assault evolves into a cycle: suppress, isolate, breach, clear, move. Rehook. But here's the twist: Tarawa's turning point isn't just tactical. It's psychological and procedural. It's the moment commanders accept that the plan is gone, and the only way out is to build a new one from the beach forward. As the Marines push across Betio, the island's geometry starts to work against the defenders. On a larger landmass, a defender can trade space, pull back, regroup, and establish new lines. On Betio, there is no depth. Once the Marines have widened their footholds and driven toward the airfield, the defenders' network becomes more compressed. Strong points that once supported each other become isolated as routes between them are cut. That isolation is the lever. It's what turns a fortress network into a collection of pockets. And this is where time and coordination begin to flip the story. Each cleared position reduces the number of angles that can fire into the next advance. Each pocket eliminated opens a safer route for ammunition and reinforcements. Each hour gained increases the American ability to concentrate force on fewer remaining nodes. The battle still isn't easy, but the shape is changing from chaotic uncertainty to a grim form of control. The Marines are learning, inside the battle, how to convert naval power into ground progress on a reef-ringed island. By November 22nd, the remaining defense is increasingly fragmented. The airfield becomes more firmly held, and movement along the island's length tightens the noose. The defenders continue to fight from prepared positions, but the overall defensive system can't regenerate once it's broken into separate compartments. And here's the hard part of the lesson. Once you're forced into this kind of methodical clearing, victory is no longer about speed. It's about sustaining pressure without losing cohesion. Sustaining pressure requires logistics on a micro scale: ammunition brought forward, water distributed, wounded evacuated, radios kept functional, units reorganized after casualties. Tarawa's small size doesn't make logistics easier. It makes the logistics line run straight through the fight. There's no rear area where mistakes can be hidden or corrected quietly. Everything happens inside the contested space. This is where the battle's legacy begins to take form even before it ends. Tarawa is a laboratory of amphibious warfare under the harshest constraints. It shows that specialized amphibious vehicles matter, especially in reef environments. It shows that pre-invasion bombardment must be planned for fortified positions, not assumed to soften them in a general sense. And it shows that accurate intelligence about terrain, especially tides and reefs, is not a detail. It's foundational. By November 23rd, organized resistance is collapsing. Betio is declared secured after roughly 76 hours of fighting. The outcome is decisive, but the cost is high, and the institutional impact is immediate. Tarawa forces a reckoning. Amphibious warfare is possible against fortified atolls, but only with adjustments in planning, equipment, and fire support integration. For the 20 to 23 November timeframe and the battle's place within 1943 operations, see NHHC summaries. Now the payoff. Why did Tarawa matter beyond its shoreline? Because after Tarawa, future amphibious operations are shaped by what went wrong here and what worked in spite of it. More emphasis is placed on getting enough tracked amphibious vehicles to the first waves, so reefs can't force a mass wade. More attention goes into hydrographic intelligence, tides, reef channels, and beach gradients. Fire support planning evolves to handle fortified defenses. Coordination between naval gunfire, airstrikes, and infantry becomes more systematic, so bombardment isn't just loud, but decisive. And perhaps the most lasting shift is doctrinal humility. Tarawa proves that even overwhelming force can be stalled by physics, terrain, and prepared defenses. It teaches commanders to assume friction and to design plans that still function when the first assumption fails. But here's the twist that makes Tarawa unforgettable. Its lesson isn't never assault an atoll. It's, if you must, build the assault around the reef, not around hope. Tarawa also influences how the war is communicated. The American public sees the reality of amphibious assault more clearly. That doesn't change the necessity of the campaign, but it changes expectations. The Central Pacific Drive will continue, and it will succeed, but it will do so with a sharper understanding that every small island can demand a major price. In the bigger arc, Tarawa is a hinge between early war improvisation and mid-war operational confidence. It is the moment amphibious warfare stops being an experiment and becomes a discipline, earned the hardest way possible. Final payoff. The Marines take Betio, and the Central Pacific Offensive keeps moving. But the victory's deeper value is the redesign of the invasion machine, landing craft choices, fire support doctrine, and assault planning, so the next atoll won't repeat the same mistake at the same scale. Tarawa doesn't just open the door to the Marshalls. It teaches the Allies how to walk through it. Tarawa came down to one unforgiving turning point, when the reef and tide forced a perfect plan to become pure adaptation. If you want more battles where doctrine was rewritten under pressure, like, share, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next campaign shift. Comment below, which factor mattered most at Tarawa, tides and terrain, fire support limits, or the defense design?